denne lørdag aftens næst sidste film. Og det er en stor fornøjelse at kunne vise den her film på et originalt 35 mm print. Ja. Og ikke noget på det. Det print, vi skal se i aften, det er simpelthen et af de originale print fra dengang. Så det er altså et print, der er ved at have en del år på banen, så det er sådan en meget autentisk oplevelse, I alle sammen skal have i aften. But now we're going to switch into English, otherwise my guest won't understand what I'm saying. Apart from the movie, it's a great honor to also welcome the director of this movie society. Please give a big warm welcome to Mr. Brian Yuzna. Thank you. Brian, we're going to do, after the movie, a thorough Q&A, where you can ask all the questions you'll have, because I know there's quite a few in the audience who've never seen the movie. Which one of you are going to see this movie for the first time? Raise your hands. Wow. That is actually really cool. You're going to get a really cool, mind-bending experience. And we're going to talk more about the movie when it's over. So please hang around, and you can ask all the questions you may have. Do you have a few words you want to tie to the movie for those who haven't seen it yet before we start?
Well, I think the ones that haven't seen it, you're going to the past. You're going back to the 80s. A very special time in the 80s.
Cool. Well, enjoy it, and we'll be back after the movie. Have fun.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Brian Yuzna. I guess the first obvious question is, how did you get the idea and what was the inspiration for this movie?
Well, I would like to ask a question first.
Sure.
So all these people who've never seen this old movie, was it kind of like what you expected? I don't know. Right?
Yeah.
You came to see an old movie you'd never seen, but somebody said, well, it's one of those 80s movies. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't hear any response. The movie was actually, it originated because I had made a few movies. I wanted to direct a movie now, and I was afraid that if I directed, you know, they always say that a first-time director is making 2 movies in one, his first and his last, and I didn't want to be that guy, so I thought, well, what if I'm no good? And the calling card I had was that I owned the Reanimator sequel rights, and so I had a friend who was making a company, and they were financing movies. I said, well, I'll make the Bride of Reanimator with you if I can direct it. Oh yes, okay. But I first have to make another movie. In case the first one's bad, I knew I would get another chance. And he said, sure. They were financed by Japanese money. And as I often say, the story of a movie begins with the financing. And the character of the movie is very related to the financing. So we had a deal, let's make a movie, and this guy, Rick Fry, came up to me with a script one day. I didn't know who he was, and he said, here, read this script. And I said, okay, and I really liked it. It was called Society, and it was very paranoid. It was about a kid who thinks his parents are very strange, and it turns out they are. It ended up at the end that they had a blood cult, and they were killing the kids and draining their blood, and it was kind of that type of thing. But I really liked the paranoid aspect of it, because I had just spent a year working very intensely with Dan O'Bannon, who was the director of Return to the Living Dead, and also was the writer of Alien, and a number of other things. But he was really kind of a crazy genius type guy, kind of dark. And I had spent a whole months working with him late at night on a movie called The Men, about a woman who discovers that all men are aliens. And it was so paranoid. I really loved it. But when I finally got the financing, Dan is a little unbalanced and he just dropped out. And I lost the movie. So I think I already had this whole world in my head of paranoia. So when I saw the society script, I said, oh yeah, I'm already here. I get this. And it's just a teenager. And every teenager feels like they've been adopted and they don't fit and all this kind of stuff. So that's where it came from. Immediately, the Japanese wanted me to meet with Screaming Mad George, who was a Japanese, began as a punk rock musician, or a punk art rock, in a band called The Mad. And he loved Screaming Jay Hawkins, and so he called himself Screaming Mad George. And he was really into surrealism, and they said, he does effects. See if you could let him do some effects for the movie. And when I met him, I immediately was like, we were immediate friends. And he showed me, I went to his house and he showed me, we watched Andalusian Dog and looked at Dali paintings, and all his stuff is very, very surrealistic. And I said, yeah, that's what let's go there. And I was trying to think of something to do with the movie that wasn't just like a bloodbath at the end. And I love effects. And I thought, what would I like to see that I haven't seen yet? And I thought, well, I'd like to see people's bodies melding into one another. Well, how can we put that in the movie? And so I tried to back engineer the movie so that became the payoff instead of the blood cult. And I also tried to take the script, which is wholly, it's Rick and Woody Keith already had the script was there, the basic structure of it and everything, and the characters. And Woody Keith is from Beverly Hills. And this is kind of this fevered dream autobiography of Woody Keith. And his parents are very wealthy. He grew up in Beverly Hills, and he thought that they were really kind of had some weird black magic type of stuff going on. He was a very paranoid guy. And so the script really reflected that. But when I mentioned, what I tried to bring out of the script, my part of it was to change it from a blood cult, for example. And I also tried to bring out what I thought were the themes that were already there. I didn't add them, but I felt like the idea that you're adopted, the idea that you're not from your parents, the idea that they're different, the idea that society is different, the idea that rich people as a class can be very different, and the idea that the incest was certainly a prevalent part of it, and a very uncomfortable part. And I had been reading about horror movies, about always dealing with taboos, and it turns out, I realize a lot of horror movies are really about incest. In one way or another, that's a real strong taboo that, if it isn't a taboo everybody shares, it doesn't quite work. And so that was definitely, of course it was in there, because when they hear about the shunting, they say, first with your dad and me, and then, and you go, oh my God, this is a girl and her parents. And so, we added the scene where Billy goes into the bathroom. And also I knew that we had to see up front a little bit of weird stuff to keep the audience involved. So anyway, that's kind of how the whole thing evolved, and we tried to make the whole ending be kind of a sucker punch with the shunting, with Screaming Mad George. Whatever I saw that he could possibly do, we just put it in, whether it made sense or not, and then tried to make sense later.
You said before that when you started out with this movie, you had already secured the deals to direct Bride of Reanimator. Do you think if you hadn't had that movie to follow up this one, that you would have gone this far with this movie? Or it seems like you didn't really have any concerns with this movie and just went for it?
I think when you begin doing things, you're kind of dumb about it. You're ignorant, I guess. And no, I thought this movie was going to be like the #1 movie in America when it came out. I mean, I just thought, wow, this is great. You know, everybody's going to like this movie. And so it was a big surprise to me when even my friends kind of didn't like it. And actually, it's only been in the last few years anybody's liked it, except in Britain. In UK, it was quite a success. In Italy, it showed on TV a lot. France and Spain, it kind of worked. But in the US, I was like, people didn't really want to, have to face me about it. And so, I don't know, I just kind of got used to that it was, it kind of didn't work the way I thought it was, and that I probably should pull myself back a little bit.
And there are also, maybe they're just rumors, but stories floating on the internet saying that you have actually worked on the idea for a sequel to Society.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. It was kind of a buried movie for a while, and then just like 6 or 7 years ago, I started getting some. I would get emails where they'd say, "We want to screen Society," and I'd say, "Wow, that's great." And then it kind of picked up and to things like this, that, in Denmark they want to show Society. What? How did they know about it? And it became kind of, and then of course it's like 20 years or 25 years later. And also I think part of it is because there's this renewed or this new kind of, it's sort of a false, it's kind of a nostalgia for the 80s by a lot of people who were never there. But I think it's because there's this, right now time has gone by and the 80s now seem like this kind of golden age of genre movies for a number of reasons. And I think if you look at it, I think they did have their own character. And I see a lot of people like now to look at 80s movies, laugh at the styles. I mean, the clothing styles and hairstyles really are ridiculous, right? I thought the 70s were bad. Wow. When I look at these and see those shoulder pads on the girls and this big hair, and you gotta go, wow, did people really think that looked good? So there's that, and it's all sort of a certain era. Certainly in the United States, it was the Reagan era. It's kind of a very strange time. And I think that there was there's an interest now. There's a retro interest. People like to collect VHSs now and have vinyl. And I think there's a reaching back to trying to recapture something that isn't quite so electronic. And I think that's part of it. And so when you go back to those days, some movies tend to hold up. Some that you would think would really hold up don't. And so it's kind of a hit or miss. And luckily, Society's sort of, I think because especially the shunting never led to a bunch of movies like that, it's kind of a little bit unique, and I think that there's a value placed on something that is kind of unique.
Mm-hmm. But have you, or are you working on a sequel?
Yeah.
Hey!
There's a few different lines of it. I've talked to a lot of people, and it's not really, I don't really think you can continue the story, because who cares? Who cared then? They didn't chase after those guys, did they? They said, well, okay, go ahead. I don't know that Billy really is the story you want to see. I think maybe another movie in that world makes sense. And I think also with I think Billy was shocked by the truth about Society. I think today maybe that character would be female and would probably, confronted with the horror of it all, would probably just want to be a part of it. And I think that's celebrity culture and the kind of this worship of the ultra-rich.
So maybe the sequel will go more into the world of the famous, or the desire to be famous?
Most of the versions take place at these nightclubs, like on Hollywood Boulevard, that you can't get in, and if you get in, you got to get into VIP, then you got to get into the VVIP. There's always a door you can't get into, or you got to get to the after party, and if you're at the after party, there's a room you can't go into, and I think this is a good kind of format for another society story.
Yeah. And when can we see it?
I guess we'll just have to make up a collection and you'll see it next cat here.
We definitely have time for questions from you guys. Any questions about the movie? Yeah?
When you made the movie, there was a lot of censorship. Did you have to cut out some things?
We made some cuts in the shunting. Not as much as you'd think. I mean, most of the movie is pretty ordinary. You know, I mean, if you think about it, nothing really is outrageous. With the shunting, at first, we had to give it to the MPAA to get an R rating. That was part of the deal with the company. Originally, the MPA said, well, you have to cut the last reel. But, you know, you just keep working and find, you know, normally with that kind of cutting, it's, you keep doing it and sending it back. After a while, they get tired of watching it. And basically, they just want you to take away the bits that work really well.
Sure, but some people say that if the MPAA wants some cuts, you basically just take it back and say, yeah, I've done it, and then send it back the exact same way it was.
There was that. At one time you could do that.
Yeah, but not anymore.
No, because with digital you have to kind of give a complete version. But today I don't know what they cut. I mean, everything seems okay now, right?
Yeah, just watching TV. Other questions?
Yeah.
No? The one.
Yeah. So you can show a butt head, but you can't show a penis. Is that right?
Maybe.
Because there weren't any penises.
Maybe. We didn't go there. Butthead seemed funny.
Yeah.
I know one of the new scripts I've seen had a penis nose. I don't know if that's funny or not.
About the shunting scene, how did you convince the senior citizen extras to participate in that scene?
I never fail to be amazed by what people will do in front of me. And a lot of the people there, this is, you know, a relative, you know, it was a low budget movie for the time. It wasn't, obviously it's a movie. It's not what you'd call a micro budget movie today. We tried to make it be like a real movie. I always try to make the movie look like what I consider a regular movie, you know. And we did get extras, but they were the type, you had to get extras that would bring their own, that had a tuxedo or evening dress. And a lot of the people in that scene are from the crew, friends and neighbors. There's even journalists there. We had journalists, horror magazine journalists that come to do a set visit. Take off your clothes and get in there. And what amazes me is when you put people in front of a camera, they love to do that kind of stuff. It's like a freedom, and somebody who would seem so straight otherwise, if they have a chance, you know, they'd love to like munch on the guts of a dead person, or do something really weird. And I think it's liberating, and it makes you feel better afterwards.
Yeah, right there.
Just a comment. I've never seen this movie before, and I really love it. I think it reminds me that nothing has changed in some ways.
When I was watching, I was like, oh, the rich guys, it's just like now.
Well, sometimes I think that's part of the reason it was it kind of came back a little in the U.S. because when I made it, I think in UK it kind of worked. On one level it worked because they have no problem understanding class. And in the US we have this mythology that there is no class. It's only if you work hard, you'll get rich. And if you don't, you'll be homeless. And it's up to you. And there's an idea that it's all an even playing field. After 2008, I think it became a little bit more clear that, oh, you know what? That's really a stupid fantasy. That's not the way the world works. And so I think to a certain degree that helped, because society wasn't meant to be kind of a criticism of society, of social structures. It was meant to be an entertaining film that just happened to be based on, you know, class, but class becomes a science fiction concept, then on vampires, you know, or werewolves, or some other kind of idea. And so, but it is there. You're dealing with rich people. The rich always feed off the poor. And I think that's not something, from my point of view, I always thought it should be advertised as a true story. You know, it's just kind of expressionistic, but it's certainly not, and I think that the key point is when the kids escape, nobody bothers chasing them. Why would they? Well, they're going to go yell and tell the big secret? We all know the secret. You know, people with power exploit people who don't have power, and, you know, I think that's you know, in a way it just gives it it makes it a little more unique. I think the story becomes a little more unique because all those effects and everything are based on something that isn't, it's not a typical horror movie trope. You know, normally horror movies would be a little more into psychology and religion and mystic, or, you know, legends and stuff. And this is a little more of a sci-fi basis for, you know, I guess, I always had a hard time even calling it a horror movie, and I'm a horror fan. I like horror. I'm not trying to say, oh, this isn't a horror movie, it's something else. It's just that it seems more surrealistic to me than horror. You know, it doesn't, for me, horror has but maybe there's a feeling to that, you know. To me, it's kind of delightful, the end. I just find it really funny and really, I like the delirium at it. I try to have a movie end in delirium. I think that's sort of fun, you know.
More questions? Yeah.
Making a sequel, do you plan to use classic special effects, or will you switch to CGI?
I would of course begin with rubber effects, puppets. I like rubber and puppets, and I like puppetry because I think the puppeteer gives it life. The life is given by the performer. I know people can put their hand in a stocking and bring it to life. You know, it's incredible what a performer can do, a puppeteer can do. With CGI, I have worked with CGI, and I think I have my own very clear ideas as to why CGI doesn't work for me a lot. And in a very simple way, one reason is because it's worked on many levels. So a CGI creature or a CGI effect is done with a lot of different machines, with a lot of different technicians or artists, and each one adds something. One makes the skeleton of it, one makes the animatronic, one puts the skin on it, one puts the wind, one lights the set, one puts the hair or the reflections. So there's all these levels of it, and all of them are given a certain budget for how much time they can work on it. If you're working not working on Harry Potter or something, I think even that they have budgets for time. If it's not going the way you want it, you can't change it. because you can't go back. This is the next level. You can't go, you know what, I don't think this movement is working right. Well, they would have to undo everything to go back there, and it becomes a real problem, and it's very hard to have anybody who's really breathing, really performing it. All these very talented people are having a part of it, but there's no real coherence to it. They also tend to do what CGI can do, which is make things go real fast. They just jump it's like Transformers. It jumps everywhere. Every CGI creature you ever saw, they jump way up there and they jump over here. Why? Because you can.
Like Yoda.
If you had
Yoda.
Yoda was a puppet.
Oh yeah, but in the prequel,
Oh, right.
the second one, yeah.
And I think that's like cartoons. It's like children's cartoons. You want to see it happen fast. But it looks animated. And I think that if you try to give weight to it, each one of a CGI shots, the shots are like 1.5 seconds, 2 seconds. That's how much you budget. Well, they say, what, you're going to have it do this? Or do you want to have it jump up to the ceiling in 2 seconds? I mean, come on, it costs the same. Let's give them something. And they want to do that stuff. And I think that always makes the CGI look kind of false, because it doesn't seem to have weight. It doesn't seem to work within the world of the movie where actors walk around. On an animation, the actors can jump all over the place too. So I think that always brings it down. But what CGI is great for is getting rid of wires, getting rid of poles, getting rid of people trying to manipulate things, adding elements. And I've tried to do that even in some of the movies I did in Spain, like on Beyond Reanimator, for example. We wanted the girl to have the soul of the warden. And Screaming Mad George did this effect in Spain. And so we tried to have the real girl, but also do mechanical parts, build a face for her where there were like metal pieces pushing against the skin, so it was popping out. But then by adding her real eyes in there, and by adding a few more places that are digital, faking them in, well, pretty soon you don't know what you're looking at, and you have kind of a real cool effect. But I think you have to do it by watching it. If you're going to build the whole effect, I would never build the shunting out of CGI. It would look ridiculous. But I would certainly do the shunting and not have to hide 13 people underneath it. Like in the wide shot, there's 13 people under there with little video cameras, bad ones back then, making these same things happen again and again. And I think that would be great if you could have people actually standing out there doing some of the manipulation and dressed in green, so you could get rid of it. So I think you could add different effects within the rubber effects, and I think that's where I would go with it.
And would you bring back Screaming Mad George?
If he would come, it's really hard with him. He moved back to Japan, and he does his own music and art there, and you'd have to drag him back.
Yeah, we will do it, all of us. We still have time for some questions. Yeah.
I'm curious about the humor in this film. We were laughing a lot tonight. If you compare to the time when it was shown in the 80s, did the audience laugh as much as we did?
If they had, it probably would have been more successful. I think a lot of people just didn't know how to take it. And I confess to being someone who had two non-cinema influences in my life in the 50s when I was a kid that really marked me. And one was EC Comics, the comics of Tales from the Crypt and the Vault Keeper and that, which was these incredible horror comics where people were always doing terrible things to each other and cutting off their heads and being zombies. And it was all kind of funny too. It was all gory and pulpy and ironic. And then the other element was Mad Magazine, which was a satirical humor magazine. And when I was a kid, I was shocked by it. I couldn't believe it. I took it seriously. I didn't understand irony. I didn't understand satire. Once I got it, I became addicted to it. And now, all my life, I've used irony, even in everyday conversations, if I don't stop myself. It's sort of a way to comment on stupidity in life without constantly commenting on the stupidity in life. You say things that have a subtext, that are ironic. Satire, I think, is when you have more of a systematic subtext for what's going on. Irony, you can just do it from situation to situation. And I think that when on movies like Reanimator, Society Bride of Reanimator, a lot of these movies, it's full of irony. It's not meant to really be comedy. Of course, some of it certainly is pretty comedic. It's kind of, but a lot of it is just like kind of making fun of what's there, making fun, we were doing a teenage movie. How can you take that serious? I mean, this was a style of movie, in that time, of kids in high school, is all sort of ridiculous. So all the irony you put in helps you have fun with it. It gives you a sense of fun doing it. And I think if you watch the movie like it's a real serious thing, maybe it wouldn't be as entertaining. Maybe you just go, this is stupid, or what's going on here? But if you see it as a piece of fun, that, wow, this is just crazy. There's a lot. I think there's a lot of irony, and the more you see it, probably the more you enjoy the movie. You don't have to take it so seriously.
We have time for one last question. Yeah.
I have a similar question. I love horror movies and splatter movies from the 80s. Movies like Reanimator and Remake. So they had a lot of blood and gore, but also a lot of humor. Do you think horror movies of today, do they still have that attitude? Do they still have that humor? What
No.
do you think of them today?
I don't think so. I think I don't know what's happened today, but for me, it seems like everything is like, I don't know if it's deadly serious, but within a genre. The genre is played very straight. It seems like there's an idea that if you just show really grisly, graphic pain, that's somehow entertaining. I don't know. I like horror movie. I love horror because it's transgressive, because it crosses the line. It surprises you by going over the line on something. And, when it doesn't do that, I'm less entertained. I don't get so much out of it. And I think the horror movies today, people can really shoot movies well now because they have the cameras and the editing and all that is accessible to everybody, and they seem to have everybody's watched a lot of behind the scenes and directors' commentaries, and you can really learn how to shoot a movie now. So they're not quite as clumsy maybe as in the 80s, but a lot of them just bore me. I just can't, I don't quite know how to fill in the spaces. I guess I feel like if you're doing something pretty typical, well, at least make a little irony out of it, or give it a little subtext and keep it entertaining. And but I wonder also whether we're kind of living in a time that's not, that doesn't have a lot of humor, Maybe that's lacking, because we do tend to the movies tend to reflect the culture, and I'm not sure that I don't know. I certainly don't see a lot of really ironic or humorous horror movies. I mean, something like Cabin in the Woods, which obviously it's a deconstruction of horror movies, But that one's worked for me. I was delighted by it. I was laughing the whole time. There was great stuff in it. But a lot of them are they're kind of grim. There's sort of a grim energy behind them. But it could just be that's our times.
Later tonight there's a horror splatter movie with a lot of humor in it called Deathgasm. And tomorrow we're going to screen one of your other movies, Reanimator, tomorrow evening. And hope to see a lot of you people here. And you're going to be there.
Nobody here has missed. Everybody here has seen Reanimator.
Anyone here who's not seen Reanimator? Cool. See all of you tomorrow. And you'll also be here tomorrow for more Q&A about that movie.
Sure.
Brian, thank you so much for attending.
Thank you very much.